We've also heard there's people who go, I could never do that. I'm going to be so jealous. I'm going to freak out and get angry. And we hear from a lot of them like, actually, it was super hot and I loved it and it was amazing and I didn't experience any jealousy.
Welcome to Sleeping Around, where we offer a peek behind the curtain of modern sex and relationship therapy and research, bringing you insights and conversations otherwise reserved for the therapy room. I'm your host, Alayna Joy, a Master's of Counseling Psychology student, content creator, and lifelong sex and relationship nerd. Enjoy the episode. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Sleeping Around. Today's conversation is with Emma and Finn. They host the weekly podcast, Normalizing Non-Monogamy, and have nearly 20 years of personal experience being in a non-monogamous relationship themselves. They met in 7th grade and have been together since their freshman year of college. And now, through their podcast, their mission is to inspire people to embrace their true selves so that together we can open minds and live authentically without shame. On Normalizing Non-Monogamy, every week, Emma and Finn interview people from around the world who are learning and exploring relationships and human connection on their own terms. Everyone's story is unique, but the one thing they all have in common is that they are not alone. And we actually recorded an episode of their podcast as well. It goes live tomorrow, January 29th, if you want to go check that out. Our conversation today is so interesting and informative. We talk about what non-monogamy is as a whole, the different types of non-monogamy, like swinging or polyamory or kitchen table non-monogamy. Emma and Finn share tips on how a curious person or couple can get started if you're interested in non-monogamy. We also talk about things like red flags to look out for and whether or not a relationship between a monogamous and a non-monogamous person can work. And then in the Patreon extended content, we go over how to talk about other people in your life about being non-monogamous and, interestingly, how to support a partner through a breakup. It's a fascinating conversation, whether you are non-monogamous or not, full of great nuggets to take away. So without further ado, I hope you enjoy. Can you start by telling us a little bit about how you found your way into non-monogamy? Tell us a little bit about your story.
We'll try to keep this somewhat high level and short, but to dive
Whatever
in,
you'd like.
Yeah. So Finn and I met actually when we were in 7th grade, and we were friends throughout middle school and high school. We started dating in college, and during that time when we first started dating, Finn came to me and he said, I want to be with you, and I don't want to limit you, and I don't want to be limited. How can we figure that out? We were very young, very naive. This was a long time ago. We didn't know what we were doing, but it started the conversation. And basically that conversation has been part of our relationship ever since. And that was about a year in. So it's been part of the conversation, and we've been stumbling along, figuring it out as we go that whole time. And it's looked a lot of different ways, but that's the initial start.
Yeah. The timeline is muddy because for us, it was never like our whole life. We were sort of in it when we could, when life allowed. We did primarily early on was what most people would refer to as like swinging. But our sort of dream was to create like a friend network that, if it made sense, like could be a little sexier. But it was really about finding people we could be open and transparent about and have conversations with that didn't feel so taboo, and that we could just be a little freer, explore a little bit, and learn new parts of ourselves. And we did that for quite a while. And then about 4 years ago, we found ourselves in our first sort of like, we'll call it serious polyamorous relationship. And that lasted about 3 years or so. And since then, we've been sort of figuring out what we're doing from there, where we're going, rebuilding a lot of our relationship, and just kind of in sort of a whole new phase of like, who are we and what are we doing with life?
I love that you mentioned the kind of dynamic nature of your non-monogamy in your relationship over the years. That's like starting the episode off right away, kind of busting a myth that maybe non-monogamy is one thing, and you kind of, maybe once you choose to be non-monogamous, then there is like a script of what your relationship looks like, and you kind of have to fill these parameters. Let's start from the beginning then. You mentioned swinging. You mentioned non-monogamy. You mentioned having a quote unquote serious polyamorous relationship. Can you tell me a little bit about what is non-monogamy, first of all, and then what's the difference between non-monogamy, polyamory, swinging, ethical non-monogamy, relationship anarchy? There's a lot of, language out there.
There's a lot. Yeah. I'll just start by saying like non-monogamy, that word itself is an umbrella term. And so we kind of use that as a catch-all for any type of alternative relationship that's not monogamy. That is the most general term to use. And then any of those other words that you're using that we're talking about are a little more specific than that.
Yeah. Lately, we've been hearing, and I agree with this, that describing non-monogamy as non-monogamy by what you're not doing versus what you are doing, there's people who don't love that, right? And so I don't personally get offended by it. It's baked into the name of our show, so it's kind of tough to go back on it at this point for us. But it is sort of the blanket term. But yeah, underneath that, again, these are generalizations we're going to share because I think in reality, people blend a lot of these different types and you kind of weave in and out of it. And so
essentially anything you can think of as far as relationship style, people are doing.
And some stuff you probably would never think of. So swinging, typically people are less inclined to develop feelings. They're more in it for typically sex or a physical connection. Again, not strictly speaking. On the polyamory side, people, not that they're not interested in sex or that isn't part of it, but they're open to deeper, maybe more intimate relationships, falling in love. So, the two root words of polyamory are poly for multiple and amory for love. So sort of an openness to falling in love with multiple people or being in multiple relationships. And then, within that, there's all sorts of other sort of subsets of polyamory. You've got like kitchen table poly, which you'll hear people talk about, which would be often people who are looking for a kitchen table dynamic would be sitting around the kitchen table with your partner. So maybe I'm at dinner with Emma and Emma's got a partner and I've got a partner. Maybe our partners are together or they're not. But either way, we're okay just sort of hanging out together, being together in spaces. Contrast that with parallel poly, where oftentimes those people, they don't necessarily want that same overlap. They're typically okay with it, but it's not a requirement that I know Emma's partners. And maybe just to throw another term in there would be metamor. So if Emma has a partner, I'm friends with Emma's partner. Emma's partner is my metamor. I guess whether or not I'm friends with her partner or not, still a metamor. Yeah. So my partner's partner is my metamor. And so with parallel dynamics, people are maybe not as keen, or they don't have to like meet and be friends and do things together.
Maybe not as intertwined.
Intertwined, sure. Yeah. So those are some of the general terms. That
we've also talked to many people who are in a couple dynamic, but one of them is monogamous and the other one is polyamorous, and that's like a mono-poly dynamic, and that's challenging in its own way. And but actually fairly common. There's also people who will have fun on vacation and like hook up with people or have connections with people on vacation or out of town on work and not in there where they live. That's common too. There's more common relationships where people will have a connection with somebody that just kind of comes into their life once in a while and it's deep and fun at that time, but then, kind of passes through and might come back around. There's people who practice solo polyamory. And I know you mentioned relationship anarchy as well, kind of they're not exactly the same thing, but they are related, where with solo polyamory, a person is practicing polyamory where generally they describe themselves as like their primary relationship is with themselves. And then they may be dating other people in different fashions and have different connections. So there's just a lot of different ways to do relationship.
Yeah. Yeah, I think one just maybe clarification on the solo poly, just not to be confused that they don't have like deep, meaningful relationships, but they don't necessarily have like a primary partner often. But again, not strictly speaking, because people label themselves however they want, and there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah. The last thing I'll say on that is like the label is the start of a conversation. Mm-hmm. So a lot of times people struggle with labels. We struggle with labels, but labels are useful as a starting point. But it's always the start of the conversation. Figure out what that label means to that person or doesn't mean to that person, because we're all dynamic humans and don't always fit into these specific things. But these are generalities that we're talking about.
I love this kind of fluidity that you're talking about within the umbrella of non-monogamy, because that possibly is something that people get wrong about when they think of non-monogamy if they're not familiar. What other sorts of misconceptions do you come across out there that you'd like to address?
Yeah, we'd love to. And this is just a brief plug. We've actually run a workshop for the last few years. It's called Is There a Right Way to Do Non-Monogamy? And the spoiler is, our opinion is there is not a right way. And so we actually just walk through a handful of myths. I think one of the first ones that we love to tell people is that it can be really intimidating. You know, we've just gone through some like basic terminology, and if you go and Google stuff, there's books upon books and podcasts, and there's just endless resources. And that you don't have to know everything about non-monogamy to get started, right? The reality is we're never going to know everything. We've been doing it for 17 years or more. We've interviewed hundreds of people. We've read tons of books. We don't know everything. We're learning. We make mistakes. And I think even if you do know all of the...
No, you guys are the experts here.
Yeah.
You need to have the answers for us.
Well, we learn a lot from our mistakes.
Yeah, it's like we're still human.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think that's just... Knowledge is very powerful and helpful, but it doesn't really replace the actual experience of doing it, right? It's like trying to learn to swim by reading a book. You can know all the techniques, you can know what to do in every situation, but what's going to happen when you're in the water and something comes up, like you've got to kind of go through the motions to learn a lot of it.
Yeah. Another myth that we like to talk about is the idea that we have to actively have, or someone has to actively have multiple partners to be considered non-monogamous. And some people feel that non-monogamy is an activity they do. Some people feel like it's part of their identity. We get to decide for ourselves what that means for us. And so if you consider yourself non-monogamous, that's your definition of what that means for you. Yeah. And there's no number of partners that you have to have. Again, likely that ebbs and flows throughout life. And so, depending on where you're at in your life and in your relationship structure, but it can look different ways and that can change too.
I'm hearing so many parallels to the queer experience, if I'm like relating this to my own life, in that like your identity, if you feel that non-monogamy or polyamory is a part of your identity, that doesn't change depending on who you're dating. So for, I feel like bi folks get that a lot, where depending on the gender of their partner, it's like their sexuality and their sexual identity is somehow valid or invalid based on the person that they're dating.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then the identity piece. It's kind of interesting that you can decide whether or not this feels like a part of who you are and a part of your identity, or a fun activity, a piece of life that you like to explore.
And I think what's important too in this, in tying in maybe one of the other myths, is that you have to go at the same speed as your partner, that you're going to be doing if you're partnered, right, that you're going to be doing these at the exact same speed. And just similarly with the identity part, I had dinner with some friends a couple of weeks ago and we were talking about this, and she was like, yeah, he doesn't really identify as a non-monogamous person, like as his identity, but definitely is doing it, has partners, has been in this space for quite a while. And she was like, by my side, she's like, totally. She's like, this is who I am to my core. And I probably couldn't give it up or walk away from it. And I think even if you were to stop doing the activity of non-monogamy, that doesn't take away the fact that is who you are. So I think similar to what you said about if I'm dating a woman and I identify as bisexual, like that doesn't make me all of a sudden straight for that time period just because that's who I'm with. So,
and just expanding briefly on like the going at different speeds, that can be really challenging to work through. I think it's easy to be, if you're in a dyad and it's the two of you working in a partnership, to feel like you need to keep up with one another. I think competition can sneak in here. And ultimately, we're all different people. We all have different interests. We all have different paces. We all need different things. And having those conversations with a partner and recognizing, no, our desires can be different. Our speeds at doing this can be different. They may be the same. That's awesome too. But it's easy to get into that mindset that we have to do everything the same and go at that same pace. And that's just not true.
Yeah.
And oftentimes the opposite is more common than it's more common to be different.
Yeah.
Which when you say it like that, it's like, oh, yes, obviously, we're all so complex. The likelihood of it lining up exactly is actually quite low, which then feels sort of intimidating if I imagine that I'm interested in exploring non-monogamy, and this is something me and my partner haven't talked about. How do you bring that conversation up? Where do you start if this is something that you want to explore?
Yeah, and we've seen it across the board, how people do it, right? I mean, everywhere from, reading a book together. One couple, he went to a workshop at school. Dossie Easton, who wrote The Ethical Slut, which is one of the holy, the holy Bibles of non-monogamy for people often. She did a workshop at their school. He, on the way home, picked up a copy of the book. Basically, they read it together and they went, well, we're non-monogamous. We're doing this. And that was it. That was the pivot point. But, others, they bring it up. My recommendation is to bring it up slowly, right? And oftentimes with these types of things, and I think it's true I think hobbies are similar, right? If I really get into something and I'm reading about it, learning about it, listening podcasts, and I'm all in on it, and then I bring it to my partner and I'm back up the dump truck and dump a mountain of information on them, it can be overwhelming. And so that's not to say don't go do your research, but just I think you have to remember when you bring this to your partner, there's a good chance that there's an information imbalance and maybe even an excitement imbalance. And so you might be really excited about something that scares the shit out of your partner. And so understanding that, I would say, if you can, and if you have the resources to be in couples counseling or couples therapy together, not a bad place to have this conversation. Bring it up in a space where you can work through it together. Yeah, and
I think that's touching on a key point is to make sure that you have support, both of you, or even if you're, if you're single and diving into this by yourself, again, support is critical. And that can be, as Finn said, in a couples therapist counseling dynamic, if that's accessible to you. We highly recommend that. Also, it can be having close friends that you can talk to about these things, and community, basically building yourself a community around you so that you have people and support in navigating this. And part of that can be finding local events. There's a lot of events out there. And there's also a lot of virtual events. And maybe finding ones that are geared towards education and exploration rather than partnering and hooking up. That can also be helpful.
Yeah.
Okay, so you have information, right? You've done some research. Maybe you've shared a book with your partner to start. You've started having conversations and you and your partner are thinking, okay, we're ready to dive in. What are some things that maybe surprised you or some pieces to look out for that you maybe can't glean from Google?
Maybe some of these are personal for me, but just I have a really easy time being oh, I can do that. I'm going to show up and be the most outgoing, chatty person. And then I get to the event and I'm just disappeared in a corner. Emma's literally, where the hell I've had that happen. She's like, hey, you're hosting this event. Get out of the corner.
Come help me.
So that, I think, a little bit of knowing yourself and giving yourself some grace when you go to these events. As Emma said, I think going to stuff that is low pressure, to something during the day, a workshop at your local sex toy store, right? They often run workshops and stuff like that. So just finding spaces where you can lean into that a little bit. And I think one of the most maybe surprising thing that people often tell us is, one, the people are so normal, that they're just like you and me, right? And that's not to say there's not a wide range of the people who show up, but it's not crazy. You're not going to be showing up into a wild movie scene. It's just going to be people there, probably nervous, awkward like you are, trying to figure this out. So I think that's one thing that surprises people. And one that I love to promote too is that not everywhere, but often we hear people say that these spaces they find to be much, much safer. than like a standard bar. We interviewed somebody a while ago where she was talking about the first time that they explored non-monogamy. They were going to get into swinging. They didn't have the resources to really pay for it. And a lot of times clubs will say single women are free. Like I have a whole lot of thoughts about this model, but regardless, so single women are free. So they're like, okay, you're going to go first and check it out because we've never done this. And so she went to the bar by herself for the first time ever doing anything in non-monogamy or swinging. And she was like, I was welcomed with open arms. People were so kind. I had people looking out for me. I never felt even the slightest bit unsafe. And I've gone to bars myself, you know, as a solo woman. And she's like, I didn't feel safe ever. And she's like, I felt amazing. And so again, not everywhere is like that, but just generally people are looking out for one another. They want this space to thrive and be a healthy one.
I'm going to add another surprising thing too. I think it can be easy to think, oh, I'm prepared. I can do this. And then emotions, feelings will come up that you're just like, oh, that hit me in the face. Like I wasn't prepared for that. And you have to slow down with those, right? You have to slow down and be like, oh, this is coming up for me. I didn't think that was going to be hard. It is hard. Let me take some time to process through that. Let me get some support. Let me talk to some people, talk to my partner. When you try to stuff that down and pretend it's not happening, that's going to ultimately
It'll bubble up.
Yeah, experience make things worse in the long run. And so it may not be fun or like exciting to work through what emotions that come up. It's really important.
Yeah. A quick positive flip side to that, which is we've also heard there's people who go, I could never do that. I'm going to be so jealous. I'm going to freak out and get angry. And we hear from a lot of them are like, actually, it was super hot and I loved it and it was amazing and I didn't experience any jealousy. So I think, you know, we don't always know how we're going to show up, how we're going to feel.
Right. Like you can be surprised kind of on both sides of the coin.
Yep.
So you mentioned jealousy. This is a big question that people have when they think about non-monogamy, right?
Yep.
How do I deal with this jealousy? Either it's expected jealousy or it's jealousy they're already experiencing.
Yeah.
I just want to normalize that jealousy is
Normalizing non-monogamy. Link in the description.
Jealousy is a normal human emotion. It may happen. Some people feel more jealous than other people. It's part of the human experience. So what I want to get across is if you do feel jealous, don't beat yourself up over that. Like it's not that you're doing non-monogamy wrong or relationship wrong or something like that. It's how you navigate it is the important piece, right? Like take care of yourself in that, take care of others, communicate with others, slowing down, taking time. Jealousy may come up. It likely will come up for one, both of you, many of you, however many of you are in this dynamic. And it's an important one to talk about, to address that. Like, I think oftentimes processing through it and talking through it and being heard in that and met and be like, oh no, that's just really hard. Like, of course you're feeling that way. That sucks. Like, I think that can go so much further than being, you know, oh no, shouldn't feel that way. Why am I feeling this way? This is wrong. This is bad. It's like, no, it's human.
Yeah.
So it's normal to experience jealousy, even if you are expert non-monogamy folks. Is that what I'm hearing? That jealousy still comes up and you're not doing it wrong, and it's not that you're automatically not cut out for ethical non-monogamy, perhaps?
Yeah. If you're like experiencing jealousy to the point where you're like completely dysregulated and you can't sleep and your life is being like severely impacted, of course, right? Like talk with your partner, figure out some strategies, figure out some help for yourself. But feeling some discomfort, you get to choose like what level of discomfort you're okay living through and growing through as a human. I would just, I loved what Emma said about normalizing it, that it's okay. And I think that's a really important thing to hear on both sides, because it's hard if you're feeling that to take it to your partner, because it's really easy to say, well, I'm going to ruin our fun. I'm going to this is going to impact our ability to do this. I don't want to ruin your fun. I don't want to impact your relationship. But inevitably, right, those are going to bubble up. They're going to come out a different way. And so I think just, first of all, knowing that it's okay to talk about it, but also as the person who might have somebody coming to you telling you that they're feeling jealous, again, if you can work with a relationship coach or therapist or doing some research on empathy and listening and being in these conversations that are really challenging when somebody comes to you, probably is activated, probably is freaking out a little bit, and might even be sort of quote unquote coming at you, to be able to separate and say, okay, I'm not a bad person. I didn't do something wrong. This isn't me. I want to be here with them. So how can I show up and listen? How can I be empathetic and support them? These are things I want to say, like, I was shit at for so long. Like me, especially, I think men are often conditioned to be fixers. And I was one of the worst fixers. Emma would bring me anything, I would try to fix it. And so this exactly the same with jealousy. So working on how you listen, I think is just as important. How do we show up and support our partners when they're sharing something hard with us? That's a really hard place to be for many of us, especially when you love somebody as much as hopefully you love your partner.
That's so helpful to think about it from both sides too. For the person who's experiencing jealousy, you mentioned first kind of the non-judgment of that experience, not judging yourself, kind of getting rid of the shoulds. I shouldn't feel this way. I should feel compersion. There's a word we can get to.
Yep, we'll get to there.
And then to talk to your partner, right? So the open kind of communication and not trying to repress or stuff down these emotions and rather share your experience with the people or person that you're dating. And then on the other side of it, to also expect to receive somebody's jealousy potentially, and like the way to hear that.
I love the flip side too of people who experience a lot of jealousy. Obviously that can be a challenge. One of my friends' partner is like the easiest going person. And he's like, could you get jealous once in a while? Right? Like there's almost like a piece of, there's a little bit of disconnect of like, wait a minute, you don't care about anything. And so just be aware that might be a thing too, where your partner's just like, do whatever. And like, you might have to process through some of those feelings.
I can personally relate in a way. My partner is very easygoing and I get jealous. We are monogamous, but I'll experience like these feelings of jealousy, and it's like kind of a spicy little fun jealousy, right? Mm-hmm. Like jealousy can also be fun.
Yep.
Yeah. It's kind of, you kind of move that energy in a way that's helpful. She doesn't really. And I'm like, can you like care a little bit? Like, look, I'm flirting. Look, she's flirting with me now. Can you be mad? Are you mad?
Yeah.
She's just not. And it's like,
yeah,
come on.
Yeah.
I love that you bring up the fact that jealousy can be that like playful, fun energy too. Like it can be that. I think we're conditioned so much of society to be like, no, jealousy's bad. Like that's the thing. And it's like, no, when talked about in a healthy way, it is a healthy, normal emotion.
Well, and a lot of people build that in. It can light a fire in you, and it can be part of that play that you come back from an experience with somebody else and you're amped up. It can really fuel the fun and the eroticism in a partnership, for sure.
So let's then go to this idea of new relationship energy. Because this kind of feeling of being amped up, I think, ties in. Can you tell us about what is that? What is new relationship energy?
Yeah.
Before we do, should we clear up compersion for anybody who heard you drop that and is like, what the hell is compersion?
Absolutely.
So I will say right up front.
We said you were going to have to take this one.
No, you're good.
Like, we're tired.
That's right.
It's the morning. Finn's ready to go.
That's right. I've already been recording all morning long, so I'm ready. My first plug here is a really close friend of ours, co-hosts events with us, is Marie Tuin. She's she's amazing. She wrote her whole PhD thesis on compersion, and she actually just released a new book called What is Compersion? So Marie is amazing, and if you want to deep dive into this more than what I'm about to share, go to the website whatiscompersion.com, and that's Marie's work. So check that out. But compersion is, sometimes people describe it as the opposite of jealousy, and I'm going to mess up Marie's definition. Essentially, it's the positive empathy for somebody else's joy. And so it doesn't necessarily need to be in and around relationships or sex. It's truly just somebody I love and care about is doing something that's amazing for them. And rather than feeling like, oh my God, you're going to leave me, you feel happiness, you feel excitement. And so typically this gets framed around relationships of Emma was out on a date, and rather than feeling, anxious or jealous, I was feeling excitement and happiness for her. And I think the main thing that I love to communicate, I know we both love to communicate around compersion, is that you're not failing at relationships in life if you're not a very compersive person. Mm-hmm. And that if you dig into Marie's book, one of the greatest, I think, takeaways from her book is that compersion is not just a feeling, but it's an attitude. So you can show up, even if I'm feeling jealous, I can still show up with an attitude of compersion. I can even say, Emma, I'm struggling a little bit with you going out on a date. I'm feeling a little bit anxious and a little jealous, but I'm also really happy for you. And I'm excited you get to go and do this. And I'm excited to come back together with you and do whatever we need to do on the other side to come back together.
Both emotions can exist at the same time.
Exactly. Yeah. So that's compersion in a nutshell.
Getting to your next point, new relationship energy. So this...
the most powerful drug in the world.
Yes. This can exist in any relationship, right? Like, it doesn't have to be a non-monogamous one. It can even exist in friendships. It can exist in between any people. Like, it's just this overwhelming...
brain chemicals.
Yes, brain chemicals, all of that happens, and that you get and you feel in that new connection with somebody. And it is an incredibly powerful drug. And what we always tell people is new relationship energy can be really fun. Enjoy the hell out of it, but maybe not make big life decisions during that time. So maybe
moving in.
We can apply that. Yeah, that can work for monogamy or non-monogamy.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. I would say side effects of NRE might include being on your phone 23 and a half hours a day, not sleeping, forgetting to do your work, all of the...
forgetting to eat.
Forgetting to live your life outside of this amazing person that you're just like, when's the next amazing photo coming? When's the next hot conversation coming? When are we going on a date? Not getting out of bed for 3 days, right? Going on a first date that lasts a whole weekend. That's a sign of pretty good NRE. So just things to be aware of, and enjoy responsibly is what I would tell you.
And know that it's going to pass. Like, it's going to shift. It's going to settle a little bit. That NRE period can last a lot of different amounts of time for people, but it will likely eventually settle into a more
homeostasis.
Yeah, regulated. I don't know, like where you're able to, I guess, conduct life a little bit more easily while being in connection.
As we're talking through it, a thought comes to mind of if you're partnered and one of you starts going through NRE, meets a new person. That's
what I was just going to ask you is, like, what's that like to watch your partner?
It's hard. It's intense.
Yeah, I bet.
And I think that's a place where, it can be a good checks and balance system, right? To say, okay, I'm in NRE, my partner's not. First of all, you're going to have to... That's a tough thing to navigate, right? Especially maybe one of you's jealous. So that can be an extra hard time when you're on your phone all day long and they're like, okay, what happened to us? Like, I don't get any of you anymore, right? So first of all, keeping in mind that those things are temporary in some ways, but also being mindful that they are very impactful still. Simultaneously, I think there's an opportunity, and this is one that we experienced. We were going through NRE at the same time. And that is a whole different ball of wax with, I think, benefits that you're both like excited about it. But also, I think the checks and balance falls away. And so now you're like almost encouraging each other's NRE. And so it can get a little extra energetic, maybe.
It's just
magnifying, multiplying.
Yes, yes. I was like, it's just something to recognize, to notice, to talk about. Be like, hey, this feels like where we're at right now. What is happening? We're not sure. We can let's kind of just discuss it and come back to it over time too. See how it's going.
Yeah.
I love that for those of you who are just listening, I'm watching you two just like share looks. You keep kind of like looking at each other and like giggling, and I'm like, oh, they know something we don't know.
Been there, done that is what we know.
We have not accessed. So we've talked about kind of common language, right? Different facets, potential facets of non-monogamy. Are there any other themes that you see come up in the interviews that you do with people in your own experience around non-monogamy?
Yeah, this is, I guess, brings up an important point that I wanted to make in this episode, was that our whole approach with our work and even with our relationship too, but like, is trying to show people that alternative relationship structures are possible, that they can look a lot of different ways. They are not the only way. Monogamy is perfectly valid if that's what you want, if that's what works for you. And we never want to tell people that like monogamy is bad, non-monogamy is the right way. For us, it's all about choice, that you do have a choice. And with non-monogamy, we've also seen a theme and talk about often that non-monogamy is kind of opting in, choosing to live more of an examined life with relationships because there's more, honestly, more work in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
Because you're managing a lot of dynamics with many people. But that doesn't mean, I don't know, just like there's no right way to do it. Like that's the biggest theme, I think, that, and that's what we're trying to show with all of these different stories. We always encourage people, start listening to an episode, see if that person resonates with you. We encourage you to listen to the whole episode because likely there will be something in that story that you'll relate to. But if you don't, then skip it and go find another story, because everyone is so different and people can do this and live life in so many different ways. And the last part I'll throw in is like another theme is we've also talked to people where they find non-monogamy and they find alternative relationship, whatever that works for them. And they're like, oh my gosh, this is what I was looking for my whole life. This is amazing. This is awesome. And then other people that try it and they're like, no, actually, like this isn't for me right now. Or maybe this is for me, but I'm going to choose to be monogamous with this person that I love for other reasons. Like people make decisions based on their life experience and their life capacities. Yeah. And I think that's just really important to note.
Yeah. You're not signing a contract like a phone, right? Like if you start and you're like, okay, polyamory seems like my thing. And then you're like, I don't have the capacity to balance multiple partnerships, but I can go out and have fun every once in a while. Like, that's okay too, right? It doesn't have to look the same way from day one to even day two, right? You learn as you go and find what works for you and what feels good for you and communicate that along the way to your partner or partners. And I think I try to tell people like have some fun with it, right? Like it can be very fun. It should be very fun, but it is also, as Emma said, there's a lot of work that goes into this. And that's, our personal experience was we thought we had a really good relationship. And I think in many ways we did, but we were also masters at sweeping stuff under the rug. And we got to a point in our explorations where we were navigating things that were hard enough that nothing fit under the rug anymore. And we had to start figuring it out. And it was brutal. Like we've been reworking so many aspects of things that we just didn't have language for, didn't know how to communicate. We were ashamed. I mean, I think that's one thing for anybody listening, there's a lot of shame wrapped up in sex, intimacy, relationships, gender identity, orientation, all of this stuff. Our society does a terrible job of making this feel warm and welcoming to anybody. And so, of course, it's going to be hard. You're going to get lied to. People are going to hide things from you because they're afraid. They're afraid to show who they are because it's scary. And because they've probably been shamed a ton before they showed up to that conversation. So even if you're not the type of person to heap shame, they had a lot of experience before they arrived to that conversation. So having grace for yourself and having grace for others who are in this, that we're not going to do it perfect. Again, you could read every single book about how to have the perfect conversation, but when you're sitting there having to share something that you're ashamed of, good luck.
Yeah.
You're going to make mistakes. Others are going to make mistakes. It's all about like having grace for that and taking care of yourself throughout the whole thing, coming back and being like, what do I need at this point? How do How do I come back to that?
There's the potential to explore non-monogamy and kind of see if it's right for you. You also mentioned that folks will make mistakes, that you'll make mistakes, and to have grace. All of this brings up the question of red flags. So let's say you are wanting to try non-monogamy, or maybe you're already exploring non-monogamy and just, dating or finding different partners. What would be some red flags to look out for, whether in yourself or in somebody that you're speaking with or interested in terms of non-monogamy?
Whew.
Yeah, this is a big one too. And I think, honestly, a lot of these can be applied to non-monogamous or monogamous relationships, like it's connections with others.
True.
I think that for me, the first thing that comes up of like, if you ever feel unsafe, if you feel uncomfortable, like extremely uncomfortable, or actually
any amount
of discomfort. But I think there's this line of like some discomfort may be okay. Like that can be a growth edge in some ways. It depends on what it is.
Yeah.
But
listen to your body.
Yes, exactly. Listen to your body, listen to yourself. When you feel something just doesn't feel right, doesn't feel quite the way it should, listen to that. Pause, slow down. That's the biggest thing, I'd say.
Yeah. I think some other things that I suggest to people, if somebody's coming to you telling you this is the way to do it, this is how, if you were a better polyamorous person, you would do this. Anybody who's telling you the way or telling you that you're not doing it the right way, I would say, sure, listen and then go talk to somebody else. I think this is where I say, and Emma said it earlier, if you can surround yourself with a community, and this is obviously harder to do in some parts of the world where there might not be as many people, but there are virtual spaces out there. But having a group of people that you can come to and say, I went out on a date and they said this, and people will be like, oh, green, that's good. Or no, run away, don't go back, right? Like that's a red flag. So people telling you how you should do something, that you're doing it wrong, those types of things I really keep an eye out for. And similarly, just this is a newer one for me, as somebody who says like, well, I don't need therapy. I'm like, okay, you're the person who needs it more than anybody. So those types of like self-aggrandizing, like, I know everything. I don't need that. I'm evolved past that. Like, I'll call bullshit on that all day. Gladly.
At this point in life, that was a lesson learned too.
Yeah, lesson learned.
Okay, those are very helpful things to look out for. I also love, Emma, what you said about pausing and checking in with yourself. I think it goes back to what we were talking about at the beginning in terms of you can research and read and listen to podcasts and Google and have all this information. And I think it's tempting because we do have so much information at our fingertips. When we're experiencing something that maybe has a bit of a question mark at the end of it, or we're unsure, the impulse is to look it up and find the answer, have somebody else give you the answer. And just that invitation to maybe pause first and just check in, how are you feeling, right? It's the internet might give you 4 different answers, or it might give you one answer, but that doesn't mean it's the answer for you. And I think we could apply that to so many things. And that's where I'm really trying to like put a pin in this idea of maybe with all of this, all of the questions that you're having, what would happen if we took a second, we paused, we stopped, and just check in with how it feels for you? Because ultimately you are the one who's going through this. You are the one it's your life to live. You really are the only one that has the answer at the end of the day for yourself.
Yeah, that's such an important point. And that answer is different, can be different for every single person. And so you can I think that's also why community is so important, because you can, as Finn was saying, you can bounce ideas off of people or thoughts or things of like, and gather different opinions and then really try them on for yourself. Does this feel accurate? Does this feel like where I'm at? Yeah. Is this feel, And so I also wanted to clarify really quick about the therapy thing. Like, I think from our experience back, like, I commented on that because we didn't we weren't in therapy for a really
Oh,
long time.
I was the guy. I'm like, I don't need that.
Yeah.
And now I'm like, give me that shit 7 days a week. I will be in there.
So good.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So, but
Yeah.
we didn't know. It's okay not to know, but like, be curious.
Yeah.
Think through things and try different things, explore.
I'd love to throw a few thoughts behind taking time, pausing, and a breath before you jump into things, or just checking in with yourself. And this is something that is really hard to do, especially when you're swimming in NRE, you're excited. It's really easy to have a scarcity mindset of like, this is my only chance to go on a date. This is my only chance to have this experience. This is my only chance to do whatever. And I've made this mistake enough to know, at least for myself, I would rather walk away from a situation excited to go back and do more the next time than I am to walk away feeling regret that I did something I really wished I hadn't done.
Ooh, that's such a good point.
And so if you can take time to say, I don't want to actually go all the way and have, penetrative sex on this date, but I would love to cuddle. And, how can you communicate that? Or, on first dates, I only meet in public places and I don't go anywhere private. So that's my standard for it. Or, just the ways that you need to do to keep yourself safe. It's not about, this is your only chance. I promise you there will be another date. There will be another opportunity. And I can hear right now, as I said that, I heard about 1 million guys screaming at me that this was their one match on Tinder that's come through in the last 7 months and they're not going to fuck it up. I promise you, I know that sucks, but like, you are going to be much happier if you stick within what actually feels good rather than trying to make something out of a situation that doesn't, even if it's what feels like your one opportunity this year. I know I'm saying that from a place of being married and I don't necessarily have to worry as much about going home alone, but just, this is a really hard thing to do. Taking a pause, checking in with yourself and not forcing a situation.
I love that we're arriving here because this is so applicable to so many things and just, I think, a good reminder for anybody. I have one more kind of area I want to ask you about. It's a bit of a left turn. Early, you mentioned the idea of a mono-poly relationship. One partner is monogamous and one partner is polyamorous or interested in non-monogamy. Can you talk us through how, maybe some tips on navigating that dynamic?
A lot of communication.
Yeah.
But and support, like working with a therapist, as we've said, or a counselor, and that you're both opting into this dynamic. I think that's a really key thing of like, there's another term that's out there that's poly under duress. And that is something that like some people find themselves in a relationship that they don't actually want to be polyamorous, and yet they're feeling like they're forced to. And so that's just something to watch out for, something to talk through with your partner. And it is possible to do a mono-poly dynamic. I think what happens is each person has to be really, really clear on who they are at that moment, what they're wanting at that moment, and talk about it. And finding things that fulfill both people in your relationship and also outside of that. So we've talked to people that they were in a relationship and one of them really loved to go on dates with other people and have connections. The other one loved to do home renovations and have things at home. And like they figured that out. The other person was not interested in dating other people. They were fully fulfilled, but they worked it out so that this really worked for their relationship.
Yep. It's a fun conversation. It's with Jenna and Wendy.
Yes.
Just wonderful couple where, Jenna goes out on dates. Wendy stays home and builds closets and does home renovations. And it's like amazing dynamic that they've got. And so I don't have a ton to add to what Emma said. I just think that this is a place to have a lot of communication and also to not count yourself as a failure if you are the monogamous person in a mono-poly dynamic. And this is, I can't remember where we heard this, or we had this conversation with somebody where they felt that actually the monogamous person, quote unquote, the monogamous person in these dynamics is actually maybe doing a little bit harder work and maybe even the more polyamorous or non-monogamous person, because you're you're doing the work. You're just not going and doing the activity. So you're figuring out how to be with yourself while your partner is exploring. You're navigating jealousy. You're navigating NRE. You're doing it all. You're just maybe not going out and doing the activity because of whatever reason. Maybe you just don't have an interest, you don't have time, whatever the reason.
Or maybe you're limited, or I don't know, there could be limitations as well in your relationship or in your physical abilities, or there's so many factors that can contribute to this. And I think what it comes down to so much is the communication around it and the talking through it and really being open with each other.
Yeah. And maybe just a throwback to red flags, and this maybe seems obvious, but a red flag would be me telling Emma, hey, I'm going to be non-monogamous, but you can't be. So if you're arriving in a mono-poly dynamic because you're not allowed to, but yet your partner is telling you, and it's usually not that explicit. It's usually, I really enjoy doing this, but it's so hard for me when you do. And every time you go out, I make it really challenging, but yeah, I want to keep doing it. So just be aware of some of those. But I think in general, a healthy mono-poly dynamic exists. We've talked to quite a few people on the show who do this, and they're really amazing conversations.
I like maybe the reframe of the example you shared, Jenna and Wendy, where one partner loves to do home renos, so she stays home while the other person loves to go meet people. You hear people talk about the idea that like one person shouldn't be expected to fulfill all of your needs, and maybe this person fulfills need X and then the person two fulfills need Y. Mm-hmm. What's interesting in what you said is there's almost another piece to that of needs that you can fulfill on your own. Yep. Or needs that maybe you enjoy fulfilling on your own, that maybe we don't get enough airtime because we put so much expectation and time into figuring out our relationship dynamics, that like, what are the things that you love doing on your own? What are the pieces of you that you love to be with you? What are the things that maybe you find fulfilling within you on your own?
Yeah. It makes me think of one of our other really fun conversations with a mono-poly couple. And I wish I had the number right off the top of my head. And the name is, if you search on our website for Taylor and Curran, it's Kuran, it'll pop up. But it's a really great conversation about this dynamic and really what you just talked about. So in a nutshell, she is the more polyamorous person. As if you listen, you'll learn that he's the one who like researched it, figured it all out, brought it forward, but it's not really for him. He actually, like, they have 4 kids under the age of 6, I think. And so she's like a mom, she's in it all day. He loves taking care of the kids. So she'll go away for the weekend. He's like, I just love it. I eat it up. I get to spend time with my kids. I don't get to when I'm at work. And so like, it's accomplishing a lot of things. One is, he gets to see her go and be the person that he is excited to be with. She gets time to go and be that person without kids. And then he gets time with the kids. And so it's just like, it's a beautiful way that they've made it work. And these relationships are a part of us. They're a part of our lives, but they're not our whole life. And it's an opportunity to fill in around it. Some
of the things that we're describing, it almost sounds like a fairy tale in a way. Like, it's like, wow, that sounds too good to be true, but it is. Like, I think maybe that's the bow on this conversation is like, these things are possible, and like, we can decide, we can opt in or opt out. And I think this opens up maybe even just some reflection within ourselves. Like, what do you want your relationship to look like? That's up to you. You know, you can decide that. We can find the things that work for us, and it's going to be different for every couple. Mm-hmm. Is there anything that we have missed? Is there anything that you wish everybody knew about non-monogamy that we haven't talked about before we head over into the Patreon exclusive?
That it's not all about the sex. I think that's something that I would love people to take away is it can get a lot of the focus, and it's, I think that's part of why people think it's so taboo. But we've talked to so many people who have platonic partnerships, platonic life partnerships, just of all varieties, that they have many partners where sex isn't even a part of it. Maybe they just like to go to movies, or they just love cuddling, or they have a specific activity. So it's not just about the sex.
And on the flip side, we've also talked to people where it is all about the sex.
It can be all about the sex.
It can be. Yeah. It just doesn't have to be.
I think to merge those two, the overall takeaway is that you should find what works best for you, and find people to surround yourself with who are loving and supportive of who you are as you shift and grow, right? Yeah. They're not just your friends because you're this way or that way or doing this, but they love you for you and want to support you for you, and can show up that way. So I think as you start to find those people, it starts to open up your world to what's possible. And then you get to explore what works for me today. What am I learning about myself? How can I grow? How can I be a better version of me? And I think, many of us, I think for myself, for sure, I learned so much about myself through these experiences and through just connecting with other people, even if it's just for deep conversations. I get so much out of it. So I hope people can find what works for them. Even if that's monogamy, again, we don't judge. You do you.
Yeah. And to be fair, we've gone through periods of monogamy in our relationship too. Like sometimes it's an ebb and flow. And the last part I just wanted to fold in is that I think oftentimes it's really, really easy to feel like you're alone on figuring out relationships, on figuring this out. As we've talked about, society doesn't really tell us that we can have a lot of different options. I think it's getting more and more the case, but at the end of the day, you are not alone. There are many, many, many people out there exploring alternative relationships, doing the work on themselves, trying to figure out what works for them. And I think, like, above all else, try to find those people. There's lots of different spaces out there for both in person and virtual. And if you try one, like if you find a community and you're like, this is awesome, it's my fit, it's great, that's awesome. And if you try one and you're like, not quite for me, then go try to find another one, because there's a lot of them out there, and you can find really people that you mesh with and
that love you and support you.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you for sharing your expertise and your wisdom with all of us. Thank you for taking the time out of your day. Yeah. Where can people find you?
Totally, yeah. So the easiest place would just be, you could Google Normalizing Non-Monogamy or go to normalizingnonmonogamy.com. Our podcast is anywhere podcasts are available. If you search for non-monogamy or polyamory or swinging, we're usually one of the top results, so that's pretty easy to find. And
it'll be linked in the show notes. It'll be linked in the description.
Perfect.
Easy access.
Yep. And when you're on our website, we'd encourage you. I'm going to talk a bit about community. One of the things that we are really proud of at this point is we built a community of about 300 plus people from around the world who are doing this and figuring it out. And so we're in an online platform all day supporting one another. So it's just one of the resources out there that we'd love to have people check out.
Yeah.
Thanks for listening. You can also access all of our extended cut episodes with bonus content from every single guest over on Patreon at patreon.com/AlaynaJoy. That's patreon.com/ALAYNAJoy. And be sure to follow us on Instagram at SleepingAroundPod for updates, teasers, episode discussions, and more. This episode was produced by Alayna Joy and Danae Fender and edited by Corey Mosqueda. See you next time back here on the couch.